The principal's daughter threw a $100 bill on the floor and yelled, "Fetch." She had no idea that was the undercover school evaluator, and now she's doing community service in a janitor's uniform after I stayed silent and let her actions speak for themselves. It was the official assessment day for Principal Powell when Ms. Clark unexpectedly cornered me in the corridor, stating, "The advanced placement history substitute called in ill. Could you cover the class until lunchtime?" Before I could clarify my actual purpose, she had thrust a lesson plan into my hands and disappeared. Very well. What better method to appraise a principal than by experiencing his school directly? Classroom 237 reeked of berry-flavored vape vapor and a sense of entitlement. Then the principal's offspring, Madison, arrived. A Starbucks cup in one hand, a smartphone in the other. The students straightened up like meerkats observing their monarch. She moved as if her father's position was a crimson carpet unrolled specifically for her designer footwear. Her gaze meticulously analyzed my attire. The 3-year-old jacket, practical flat shoes, the coffee mark I had failed to conceal. Her grin spread like an oil slick, poisonous and impossible to contain. The eye roll she executed deserved an athletic award. "Another substitute," she declared to her companions, asserting that substitutes were merely unsuccessful educators collecting participation awards. The ensuing laughter felt rehearsed, compulsory. Her acquaintances understood their roles. When I presented myself as Ms. Shirao, she brightened with a kind of delight typically reserved for felines cornering rodents. "Shirao, like the Chinese eatery on 5th? Do I make deliveries on weekends?" Her friend Tyler guffawed as though she had invented humor. My fingers pressed into the attendance register directly over her father's evaluation document tucked underneath. I attempted to remind myself. Deep breaths. Embody the patience of a genuine substitute who required this employment. Madison's self-assurance swelled with each passing moment. She retrieved her phone, narrating my appearance for her Instagram story. The substitute teacher-style police were apparently in session. Discount store clearance rack. Thrift shop. She zoomed in on my footwear, speculating which budget shoe store was having a closing down event. When I requested her to put the device away, she actually chuckled. Not a quiet laugh, but a full-throated peal that suggested she had overcome greater obstacles for breakfast. The anecdotes flowed. Ms. Garcia, who attempted to give her detention, now instructs kindergartners in finger painting. Mr. Birch, who failed her for plagiarizing an essay, mysteriously transferred mid-semester. Each narrative made her appear taller, made my jacket feel more worn. Then came the coffee incident. She bumped my desk with her hip while gesturing expansively about her visit to the shopping center. My coffee mug erupted across my papers in a brown deluge. Her oops was about as genuine as a politician's promise. She filmed me frantically searching for paper towels, narrating how substitutes were essentially custodians with teaching credentials. The $100 bill materialized from her wallet like a conjuring trick designed to mortify. She waved it slowly, explaining how this single note represented 10 hours of substitute pay, perhaps 12 if the district was feeling parsimonious. The bill fluttered to the floor between us. "Fetch," she commanded. The word lingered in the air like a provocation. She elaborated with the patience of someone training a particularly dim-witted canine that I could retrieve the money or she could inform her father I was incompetent. My decision. I stooped, picked up the bill, and observed her triumphant smile blossom. That's when she sprang onto my desk, her boots leaving dark marks on the wood. She called for a class vote on whether I should depart immediately and spare everyone the vicarious embarrassment. Hands rose. Not all, but a sufficient number. "Democracy in action," she proclaimed, live-streaming the entire event. She began enumerating my shortcomings. The inexpensive attire, the compliant demeanor, the obvious desperation of someone clinging to the lowest rung of the educational ladder. Her father, she explained, was reorganizing next year. But perhaps if I understood my place, remained silent, accepted that some individuals were destined to serve while others led. The intercom prevented her from concluding. "Ms. Shirao to the principal's office immediately," the principal announced. Madison's smirk could have energized a small town. She graciously offered to speak favorably on my behalf, perhaps assist me in retaining my substitute license if I apologized appropriately. I gathered my belongings, including the coffee-soaked evaluation folder with its official Board of Education seal, now clearly visible. Madison's gaze followed the movement, some primal part of her intellect registering peril. I mentioned almost casually that her father was expecting me. We had a meeting scheduled, his performance review. The Board of Education is very interested in how principals maintain discipline and professional standards. The color drained from her face so rapidly, I feared she might faint. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish discovering air. I thanked her for the vivid demonstration of power dynamics and impropriety. The board appreciates specific examples. The $100 bill will serve as excellent evidence. Her friends had suddenly discovered fascinating content in their textbooks. She stammered about jokes, about context, about how everyone knew she did not genuinely mean it. The bell interrupted her. I told her, "Better hurry to your next class. Your father is strict about tardiness, isn't he?" Then I departed. The final sound before the door closed was Madison's shriek about college recommendations, about transcripts, about how her father had promised if she received one more complaint. But I was already walking toward Principal Powell's office, my heels clicking with renewed purpose. I walked through the deserted hallway, my footsteps echoing off the linoleum. The evaluation folder felt heavier with each stride, its coffee-stained edges a reminder of Madison's performance. Teachers peered out from doorways as I passed, their expressions shifting from curiosity to recognition to something that resembled hope. Principal Powell's office door stood ajar. He sat behind his dark wood desk, reviewing what appeared to be student academic records. His head snapped up at my approach, and I observed his countenance transform in real time. Confusion dissolved into recognition, which solidified into cautious professionalism. He had clearly read the morning's electronic mail from the board. I entered without knocking, placing the marked folder directly on his desk. His eyes tracked the movement, lingering on the coffee damage. His smile stretched across his face, but it never reached his eyes. Powell stood, extending his hand in a gesture that felt more like an olive branch than a greeting. His grip was firm, but brief. He gestured to the leather chair opposite his desk, then settled back into his own seat. His coffee mug paused halfway to his lips as he noticed the board seal on my folder. The silence extended between us. Powell's fingers drummed against his desk, a nervous rhythm that betrayed his composed exterior. He cleared his throat, launching into an explanation about the morning's unfortunate mix-up. His words tumbled out faster as he spoke, describing how substitute shortages created impossible situations. How Ms. Clark had simply been attempting to ensure students received instruction. His phone vibrated on the desk, then again. And again, Madison's name flashed on the screen with each notification. Powell's jaw tightened as he silenced the device, but the damage was done. I had already seen the preview of her initial message. "Dad, emergency. The evaluator was in my class." I retrieved my notepad, making a display of reviewing my morning observations. Powell's smile grew more strained with each passing second. He loosened his necktie, a gesture that seemed unconscious until he caught himself and smoothed it back down. A knock interrupted the escalating tension. Janet, his administrative assistant, entered with an apologetic expression. She informed Powell that 3 teachers had requested to speak with Ms. Sherroud during their free periods. She handed him a list of names, and I watched his face carefully as he read, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the paper. Powell faced a dilemma: restrict my access and appear defensive, or cooperate fully and risk what his teachers might disclose. His internal calculation unfolded across his features. Finally, he forced another smile and assured me I would have complete access to anyone I wished to interview. He leaned back, adopting a conversational tone. He spoke about the unique difficulties of working with privileged students, how their advantages sometimes created behavioral issues. Madison, he confided, struggled with boundaries. The admission felt calculated, an attempt to control the narrative before I could form my own conclusions. I thanked him for his candor and excused myself to begin teacher interviews. The faculty lounge buzzed with activity when I entered, but conversations ceased mid-sentence. Teachers suddenly found their grade books captivating. Paper rustled. Coffee was stirred with unusual intensity. One teacher, Ms. Williams, caught my eye as she gathered her materials. Something passed between us, a silent acknowledgement. She brushed past me on her way out, and I felt something pressed into my hand, a folded note. I waited 5 minutes before following the note's instructions to the supply storage room. Williams stood among boxes of printer paper and cleaning supplies, wringing her hands. She glanced at the door repeatedly as she spoke in hushed tones about Madison's conduct. The stories spilled out, destroyed assignments blamed on other students, verbal harassment that went unreported, a climate of apprehension that permeated the entire institution. Williams explained how complaints vanished, how teachers who spoke up found themselves with mysteriously challenging schedules or transferred to less desirable roles. She had learned to document everything privately, maintaining her own records that never made it into official files. The lunch bell rang, sending us both back to our respective duties. I found Powell already waiting in the cafeteria, having claimed the seat beside mine before I could choose my own table. He guided our conversation toward his innovative fundraising initiatives, his community collaborations, his vision for academic excellence. This arrangement felt oddly convenient. Ms. Shirao just happens to be assigned to Madison's class precisely when she is there to evaluate Powell. All while Madison observed from across the room, her usual entourage conspicuously absent. Ms. Clark appeared at my elbow as Powell excused himself for a phone call. Her apology came in hurried whispers. She had known exactly who I was that morning, but had panicked when the substitute called in sick. An unsupervised AP class during an evaluation would have reflected poorly on the school, on Powell. The fear in her voice when she mentioned his name conveyed more than her words ever could. That evening, I spread Madison's official dossier across my hotel room desk. 2 minor infractions over 3 years, one for dress code, another for tardiness. Yet during my interviews, teacher after teacher had referenced previous incidents and patterns of behavior. The discrepancy was astonishing. My laptop chimed with a new electronic mail. No sender name, just a timestamp. The message was brief. Check why Ms. Garcia truly transferred. Not the first evaluation Powell survived. I gazed at the screen, fragments of a larger enigma beginning to coalesce. Garcia's name had surfaced multiple times throughout the day, always accompanied by significant glances and incomplete sentences. Tomorrow, I would need to investigate further. The next morning arrived with Powell's revised interview schedule. My meticulously planned teacher meetings had been rearranged, replaced with a procession of parent volunteers who extolled his virtues. Each one mentioned his availability, his fundraising achievements, his commitment to excellence. The script felt rehearsed. Between parent testimonials, I accessed Garcia's transfer records. Personal reasons was listed as her motivation for leaving mid-year, but the timeline was suspicious. A surge in Madison-related incident reports had occurred in the weeks before Garcia's departure, then abruptly ceased. The last report was dated exactly 1 week before her transfer request. Powell's next maneuver was assigning Madison as my student guide for the remainder of my visit. She appeared at my side with a practiced smile, all traces of yesterday's apprehension carefully concealed. She would escort me between interviews, ensure I did not get lost, help me comprehend the school's intricate layout. Her true objective was transparent. The school's wireless network developed mysterious connectivity issues whenever I attempted to access shared drives. Error messages appeared repeatedly, compelling me to switch to cellular data. Madison observed my frustration with poorly hidden satisfaction. Assistant Superintendent Blake joined me for coffee during a break. He mentioned almost casually how Powell's annual golf fundraiser had broken records this year. The community support was unprecedented. Difficult to find that kind of backing, he mused, stirring sweetener into his cup. The message was unmistakable. I excused myself early, driving across town to Garcia's new school. She taught 5th grade now, a significant change from high school AP English. The woman who greeted me in her classroom looked years younger than her personnel file suggested, as if leaving Powell's school had lifted an unseen burden. Garcia's narrative unfolded slowly. She had maintained a private journal documenting Madison's escalating behavior and Powell's reactions. Every incident, every dismissed complaint, every conversation where she had been told to be more understanding. The final breaking point had been a parent conference where Powell had strongly suggested she reconsider Madison's failing grade. I was told pursuing it would harm my career, Garcia said, her voice steady, but her hands trembling. That I was being inflexible, that I didn't grasp the broader situation. The transfer was presented as an opportunity, but we both knew what it truly was. I returned to find 3 more teachers waiting to speak with me. Each one mentioned Madison during their interviews, then immediately changed subjects when they noticed the recording device. Their glances were nervous, calculating. They wished to speak the truth, but feared the repercussions. The pattern in Madison's disciplinary record became clearer with each interview. Serious behavioral issues resulted in verbal warnings, while other students received detention for minor dress code infractions. The disparity was stark and pervasive. Tyler approached me after school, glancing around nervously. His conscience was troubling him, he admitted. The bullying, the cruelty, it wasn't who he wanted to be, but Powell wrote his college recommendation letters. One word from the principal could derail his future. The internal conflict played out across his youthful face. Mr. Chun, the head custodian, emptied my waste bin with deliberate slowness. He mentioned, his voice casual, that some things never made it into official reports. His eyes flicked meaningfully to a security camera in the corner, its lens covered with black tape. Maintenance issue, he said with a shrug that suggested otherwise. Madison's next attempt at intimidation came in the parking area. She had called to have my rental car towed for improper parking despite my valid visitor's pass. Janet intercepted me with a warning, suggesting I move my car immediately. The secretary's small act of defiance spoke volumes. My final interview of the day was with Ms. Williams again, this time officially. She sat across from me in the conference room, hands folded carefully on the table. She spoke in measured tones about school atmosphere, about professional development, about Powell's leadership approach. But when I inquired about documentation, she paused. I keep my own files, she admitted finally. Personal records, just in case. The weight of those 3 words hung between us. Williams had learned to protect herself in a system that would not protect her. The hotel breakfast buffet was nearly empty when Sarah Powell materialized beside my table, carrying a plate of fruit and wearing a smile that did not quite conceal her objective. She settled into the chair across from me without invitation, launching into pleasantries about the climate and the quality of the hotel's coffee. Her manicured fingers drummed against the table as she mentioned how challenging teenage daughters could be, how Madison was navigating a difficult phase. The way she casually dropped names of board members she knew personally made her intentions crystal clear. I recognized the technique immediately, subtle intimidation veiled in maternal concern. Sarah's eyes never left my face as she expressed sympathy for the pressures of evaluation work, how exhausting it must be to travel constantly, to judge situations without full context. She reached for her phone, scrolling through photographs of charity galas where she stood beside influential district officials. Each image was a reminder of the Powell family's influence. My professional demeanor remained firmly in place as I thanked her for the breakfast company and excused myself. The encounter confirmed what I had suspected. The Powells were mobilizing their network. Back in my room, I documented the interaction in my notes, adding it to the growing pattern of interference. Chen's wife caught me in the hotel lobby that afternoon, her nervous energy palpable. She explained how their daughter had graduated the previous year, but still refused to discuss her senior year experience. The woman's hands trembled as she described finding her daughter's deleted social media accounts. The therapy sessions that followed, the way Madison's name still made her daughter flinch. The story emerged in fragments, each detail painting a clearer picture of systematic harassment that went far beyond typical teenage cruelty. Powell's next attempt at control came through Janet, who appeared at my hotel room door looking uncomfortable. She had been asked to shadow my interviews to take her own notes for Powell's review. But instead of compliance, Janet surprised me. She was weary of certain patterns, she admitted, glancing down the hallway as if Powell might materialize. With only 2 years until retirement, she had reached her limit of enabling behavior she knew was wrong. The following morning, I arrived early to photograph attendance records. The patterns jumped out immediately. Madison's strategic absences on major test days followed by makeup exams with noticeably different questions. The gradebooks told their own story of favoritism, with Madison's scores showing suspicious improvements after parent conferences. District Human Resources responded to my inquiry about evaluation parameters with bureaucratic precision. They confirmed that unsubstantiated student behavioral claims were not typically included unless they demonstrably impacted the learning environment. The careful wording suggested they were already anticipating Powell's defense strategy. The parent coffee group that afternoon included 3 mothers who had clearly coordinated their attendance. They shared stories of their daughters' experiences with Madison, careful to frame them as concerns about school climate rather than direct accusations. One mother mentioned considering private schooling despite the financial strain, just to escape the toxic environment Madison created. That evening, my usual jogging route took me past the hotel parking lot where I noticed Madison's distinctive vehicle circling slowly. She made 3 passes, her face illuminated by her phone screen, before finally driving away. The surveillance attempt was clumsy but unsettling. Coach Martinez proved unexpectedly forthcoming during his interview. He disclosed that the previous vice principal, who had attempted to address Madison's behavior, had been reassigned to a district office special project within weeks. The coach's bitter laugh suggested the reassignment was anything but voluntary. Sarah Powell's lunch invitation arrived via Janet, who delivered it with an apologetic expression. I politely declined, citing scheduling conflicts. Word of my refusal spread quickly through the staff, earning surprised looks and subtle nods of approval. Apparently, I was the first evaluator to resist the Powell charm offensive. Miss Clark's hurried confession about knowing who I was raises so many questions. Why did she pretend not to recognize me if she was just worried about the evaluation? There is something deeper here than merely covering for a missing substitute. The board's electronic mail reminder about my 72-hour deadline arrived with perfect timing, standard procedure, but clearly intended to add pressure. I was running out of time to construct a case that would hold up. Williams made her decision that evening, arriving at my hotel with a cardboard container. Inside were years of documentation, Madison's grade improvements after parent conferences, detailed notes about administrative guidance regarding grading flexibility. The pattern of intervention was undeniable. Each incident was small enough to seem reasonable in isolation, but together they painted a picture of systematic manipulation. The school board meeting that night offered an unexpected glimpse into Powell's state of mind. He worked the room with his usual confidence, but sweat soaked through his shirt despite the air conditioning. Madison's absence was conspicuous, the first time she had missed a public event where her father was performing. Powell intercepted me in the parking lot afterward, his friendly facade slipping slightly. He wanted to clarify any misunderstandings about his daughter, explaining that teenagers were naturally dramatic, that social media amplified every minor conflict. His rehearsed speech about modern parenting challenges felt hollow against the weight of documentation I had accumulated. 2 more teachers requested off-the-record conversations, their fear of reprisal warring with their need to be heard. They spoke in careful circumlocutions, never quite naming Madison directly, but ensuring I understood the scope of the problem. Their relief at finally being able to share their experiences was palpable. My investigation into Madison's previous school revealed she had been asked to leave for incompatibility with school culture, administrative code for behavioral issues too problematic to ignore, but not severe enough for expulsion. Notably, no official infractions had transferred with her records. Powell's support base became clearer through interviews. Parents who benefited from his flexible policies lauded him, as did benefactors who appreciated his fundraising prowess. His power stemmed not from fear, but from mutual advantage. He gave them what they desired, and they protected him in return. The Parent-Teacher Association president's revelation came with a USB drive containing recorded meetings. The audio revealed how concerns about Madison were consistently redirected to general bullying prevention initiatives, never addressing the specific source. Powell's skill at controlling narratives was impressive in its subtlety. Janet provided crucial context during our coffee meeting. Powell was not overtly corrupt, she explained, but selectively oblivious. He genuinely believed he was assisting Madison by shielding her from consequences, unable to see how his protection had created a menace. His affection had become enabling. His safeguarding had become corruption. The Chen family's full narrative emerged over dinner. Their daughter had internalized Madison's treatment to the point where it affected her college applications. She had convinced herself she was not good enough for top universities, that Madison's assessments of her worth were accurate. The psychological harm extended far beyond the school grounds. Sarah Powell's attempt at bribery came cloaked in philanthropy. She offered to donate to any organization of my choice as thanks for my diligent work. The implication was clear: accept the donation and soften the evaluation. I declined with professional courtesy, documenting the interaction immediately. Powell contradicted himself during a hallway encounter, forgetting his earlier claim about never interfering with grades. Madison, standing nearby, actually rolled her eyes at her father's obvious falsehood. Even she recognized his inability to maintain a consistent story. Multiple teachers confirmed similar experiences through carefully legalistic language. They had learned to speak in code, to imply without accusing, to protect themselves while still conveying truth. The climate of fear was pervasive but subtle. Word of my investigation's focus had spread through administrative circles. Powell's usual allies began distancing themselves, their support suddenly less enthusiastic. Self-preservation trumped loyalty when accountability loomed. The custodial staff mentioned that Powell had ordered them to remove several boxes the night before my arrival, the first time in 3 years he had cleared out old records. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Parents began connecting through informal networks, sharing stories they had never officially reported. The collective weight of their experiences created momentum for change that had been building for years. Confronted at a fuel station, Powell's facade slipped completely. He insisted he was protecting his daughter from overreacting adults who did not comprehend teenage dynamics. His self-justification revealed a man who had convinced himself that his enabling was love. Teachers who had remained silent began approaching younger colleagues with apologies. They should have done more, they admitted. Should have taken a stand sooner. The guilt of their complicity weighed heavily now that change seemed possible. Madison's college counselor revealed irregularities in her recommendation letters, sections Powell had insisted on editing that inflated her accomplishments and minimized disciplinary issues. Even her college applications were built on fabricated narratives. Garcia's testimony revealed the critical truth. Madison's behavior had escalated precisely because consequences never materialized. She had been enabled rather than malicious, taught through experience that rules did not apply to her. The fault lay more with the system that protected her than with the teenager who exploited it. I spent hours ensuring cooperating teachers would not be identified in my report, using aggregated data to show patterns without exposing individuals. Their bravery deserved protection. Support staff began timing their regular duties to assist my investigation, emptying waste bins when I needed private conversations, scheduling maintenance during crucial interviews. Their subtle support spoke volumes about their desire for change. Madison's attempt to spread rumors about me through group chats backfired spectacularly. Screenshots surfaced showing her contradictions, her falsehoods about our interactions. Her own peers were beginning to see through her carefully constructed image. Board member Thompson's daughter, a legal professional, explained the potential legal liability the district faced. The documented harassment created exposure to lawsuits that could drain resources for years. Financial self-interest might succeed where moral arguments had failed. Local parent social media groups buzzed with speculation about the evaluation. I maintained professional silence, neither confirming nor denying the rumors that swirled. The community was ready for change, even if they did not yet know what form it would take. Previous evaluation reports showed Powell had barely passed twice before, with similar concerns noted in vague, cautious language. He had survived by promising improvements that never materialized, by leveraging his fundraising success against his failures. With 24 hours remaining, I faced the challenge of every evaluator, weighing what could be substantiated against what everyone knew to be true. Legal obligations battled ethical ones as I compiled my findings. Sarah Powell's wine-fueled confession at book club reached me through 3 different sources. She knew Madison needed assistance, but feared the stigma of admitting her daughter's problems. The family's dysfunction ran deeper than simple enabling. The evaluation's significance crystallized as I reviewed my notes. This was not just about Powell or Madison. It was about whether accountability existed in the district at all. If Powell survived this evaluation, it would send a clear message that connections mattered more than conduct. Madison's tantrum in the hallway about ruined futures provided an opportunity to model professional behavior. I calmly de-escalated, demonstrating to surrounding students an alternative to Powell's enabling approach. Several teachers later mentioned how impressed they were by my refusal to engage with her dramatics. The superintendent could no longer claim ignorance once my documented patterns were formally presented. The weight of evidence would compel action or reveal complicity. Either outcome would alter the district's dynamics. 7 teachers ultimately signed statements about climate issues, carefully worded to avoid naming Madison directly while making the source of problems clear. Their coordinated action represented years of suppressed frustration, finally finding expression. Powell's contract renewal discussion was tabled pending my evaluation results, the first time in his tenure that his position had been questioned. The board's apprehension was palpable as they realized the extent of their potential liability. Madison's panic about college led to her first sign of accountability. She approached me privately, pleading with me to understand that everyone makes mistakes. The desperation in her voice suggested she finally grasped that consequences might actually reach her. Powell's lawyer friend advised him to prepare for multiple outcomes, a clear indication that even his inner circle recognized the gravity of the situation. The careful legal maneuvering had commenced in earnest. My evaluation report took shape over sleepless nights, balancing harsh realities with professional language. I recommended significant reforms and mandatory leadership coaching rather than termination, a measured response that acknowledged both the problems and the possibility of redemption. Teachers felt validated simply by having their experiences documented officially, even without dramatic consequences. The acknowledgement of their struggles mattered deeply. Change might come slowly, but it would come. Parents who had remained silent expressed relief that someone had finally articulated what they had thought for years. Williams appearing with that box of documentation seems awfully convenient. Teachers keep meticulous records of precisely what someone requires. The timing of Powell's file removal and this evidence appearing makes me wonder who is truly orchestrating this inquiry behind the scenes. The community was ready for change, had been ready, but needed an external catalyst to break the inertia of Powell's influence. My evaluation report took shape through careful documentation and measured language. The final draft recommended significant reforms with mandatory leadership coaching rather than termination, a response that acknowledged both the problems and the possibility for redemption. The morning of the board meeting arrived with unexpected energy. Community members filled the auditorium seats an hour before the scheduled start time. Madison sat between her parents in the front row, her usual friend group noticeably absent, her fingers twisted nervously in her lap as more people filed in. Powell presented his accomplishments with practiced confidence, highlighting fundraising records and test score improvements. His selective data painted a picture of excellence that my report would soon contextualize. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning as he noticed how many teachers had attended. Tyler's mother stood during public comment, her voice trembling as she described her son's moral struggles in the toxic environment. She explained how he had come home crying after participating in Madison's cruelty, torn between peer pressure and his conscience. Other parents nodded in recognition. Board member Chen asked pointed questions that Powell could not deflect with his usual charm. Her daughter had graduated from Lincoln High, she revealed, and the story she had shared about certain students' unchecked behavior had been deeply concerning. Powell's attempts to redirect toward his innovative programs fell flat. I faced a critical decision about referencing Garcia's testimony. The patterns she had documented were damning, but exposing her could invite retaliation. I chose to reference aggregate patterns without identifying individuals, maintaining professional ethics while ensuring the truth emerged. Madison stood unexpectedly, clutching a prepared statement. Her apology focused on learning from mistakes and growing as a person. She maintained eye contact with her father throughout, never once looking at the audience. Powell's jaw tightened with each word, his carefully constructed narrative crumbling. The prepared statement rang hollow against the documented patterns of behavior. Madison's voice cracked as she mentioned wanting to be better, but the performance felt more like damage control than genuine remorse. Several teachers exchanged knowing glances. Sarah Powell followed with her own plea for second chances, the first public acknowledgement of any failures. Her designer suit could not hide the exhaustion in her eyes as she admitted they had lost perspective on appropriate boundaries. The admission came too late for the families who had already suffered. The board implemented mandatory leadership review protocols with independent student advocacy positions. These Powell protocols, as they became known, would ensure no principal could shield problem students from accountability. The vote was unanimous, even Powell's usual supporters recognizing the liability of continued inaction. Powell accepted enhanced oversight rather than face potential termination. The agreement included family counseling requirements and regular reviews of his decision-making processes. His relief at avoiding termination was tempered by the reality of constant scrutiny. Madison's parents decided she should take a gap year before college with mandatory community service hours to demonstrate growth. The prestigious university that had accepted her would defer enrollment pending evidence of genuine change. Madison's Instagram account went dark that same evening. The district hired a new assistant principal specifically to handle student discipline independently from Powell. Ms. Williams smiled genuinely for the first time in months when the announcement was made. The position would report directly to the district, bypassing Powell's influence entirely. My evaluation became a model for addressing enabled misconduct without destroying careers. The focus on systemic reform rather than punitive measures created a framework other districts could adapt. Professional accountability had finally reached the Powell administration. 3 months later, Williams sent an update that validated the intervention's impact. Madison attended weekly therapy sessions and completed community service at the local youth center. Her interactions with younger students were closely supervised, but initial reports suggested genuine effort at change. Powell participated in mandatory leadership coaching. While every significant decision underwent review, the process was humbling for someone accustomed to unchecked authority, but he was slowly learning to separate parental protection from professional responsibility. His fundraising abilities remained valuable, just no longer sufficient to excuse other failures. Teachers reported gradual climate improvements, though changing established patterns took time. New students no longer arrived with warnings about certain untouchable classmates. The hallway dynamics shifted as students realized consequences applied equally to everyone. The Chun family's daughter sent a handwritten thank you note from her college dormitory. She had found her confidence again, realizing that Madison's assessments had never defined her worth. The note mentioned considering education as a career, wanting to create better environments than she had experienced. Garcia was considering returning the following year, encouraged by the structural changes. The new oversight protocols would prevent the isolation she had faced when reporting problems. Her potential return symbolized how accountability could restore faith in the system. The documentation I had compiled served as evidence in 2 civil suits filed by former students. The district settled quietly, implementing additional training requirements for all administrators. Powell's personal assets remained protected, but his reputation would never fully recover. Madison's former friends distanced themselves once her protection disappeared. Tyler publicly apologized to students he had helped torment, his genuine remorse earning cautious forgiveness from some. The social hierarchy that had enabled Madison's behavior crumbled without institutional support. Janet retired on schedule, but spent her final months training her replacement on the new accountability procedures. She ensured the institutional memory of Powell's enablement would not disappear with her departure. Her legacy was a system that protected students over administrators. Local parent groups continued meeting monthly to discuss school climate. The evaluation had catalyzed community engagement that extended beyond just Powell and Madison. Parents felt empowered to demand better from their schools. The $100 bill from Madison's classroom performance became a symbol in district training materials. The image of privilege attempting to humiliate authority resonated with educators facing similar dynamics. Madison's moment of cruelty had inadvertently created lasting change. Powell's golf fundraiser continued, but under new oversight, ensuring funds were distributed equitably. His networking abilities were channeled into legitimate benefit for all students, not just those whose parents could reciprocate favors. The events raised less money, but served more students. Madison's gap year community service included cleaning duties at the same youth center where she had once mocked custodial staff. The irony was not lost on anyone, least of all Madison herself. She worked quietly, her designer clothes replaced by practical uniforms. The security cameras that had mysteriously malfunctioned during Madison's worst behavior were replaced with a system that uploaded directly to district servers. Mr. Chin supervised the installation personally, ensuring no principal could control the narrative through selective footage again. Sarah Powell joined a support group for parents of troubled teenagers, finally acknowledging what she had spent years denying. Her charity work shifted focus from galas to genuine service. The transformation seemed authentic, born from genuine recognition of her enabling role. Student behavior referrals showed a marked shift in patterns. Minor infractions by all students received consistent consequences, while serious behaviors faced appropriate escalation. The favoritism that had poisoned school culture was systematically eliminated. Powell learned to separate his dual roles through intensive coaching. His love for Madison no longer translated into professional protection. The boundaries were difficult but necessary, creating healthier dynamics for everyone involved. The evaluation's ripple effects extended beyond the school. Other principals in the district proactively reviewed their own practices, not wanting to face similar scrutiny. The threat of accountability proved more powerful than actual oversight. Madison's therapy revealed deeper issues than simple entitlement. Years of protection had stunted her emotional development and social skills. The work was difficult, but she was finally facing consequences that could not be negotiated away. Williams received a District Excellence Award for her courage in documenting problems. The recognition came with a monetary bonus and expanded responsibilities in the new accountability system. Her vindication was complete, but bittersweet. The school's reputation gradually improved as word spread about the reforms. New families who had avoided the district began enrolling, trusting that their children would be protected from unchecked bullying. Enrollment numbers reflected renewed community faith. Powell's evaluation file remained active for 3 years of probationary oversight. Each review showed incremental improvement in his judgment and decision-making. He would never regain full autonomy, but he was learning to work within appropriate constraints. Madison's college acceptance was officially deferred pending completion of gap year requirements. The university's admissions office would reevaluate based on demonstrated growth rather than her father's influence. Her future finally depended on her own actions. The structural changes implemented after my evaluation became known as the Shirao protocols throughout the state. The systematic approach to addressing enabled misconduct through documentation and graduated consequences provided a replicable model. Real change happened incrementally when systems finally stopped enabling harmful behavior and started demanding better from those with privilege and power. Thank you for engaging with this narrative. I hope you have a wonderful day.